Well, good morning again. I realize I failed to introduce myself earlier. I'm Wayne Honeycutt. I have the pleasure of serving as the president and CEO of the Soil Health Institute. Um, it's a real pleasure indeed. I wanted to visit with you a little bit about some of the priorities and strategies for advancing soil health, but given that the heading of our meeting today and tomorrow is soil health, a global imperative. I really felt like it would be helpful to kind of frame it up in some of the few imperatives that really exist on a global scale. Of course, we know about the population growth. Just in 30 years, we're going to have to feed another 2 billion people. We know the major challenges that that's going to cause, particularly because there's so many other challenges that are going on. With drought, at any given time around the world, approximately 1% of the world is in drought, experiencing drought. But our models are telling us that by the year 2100, that number is going to increase to 30%. Think of what that's going to do to the evaporative demand. Think of what it's going to do to the water now that we need to feed that burgeoning population. We also know that we can go back using coral reef data, ice ring data, tree ring data, go back over 1,000 years, and the temperatures that we've been experiencing in the last couple of decades are the warmest over that 1,000+ years. And it's really demonstrated well just looking at what's happened to the Arctic sea ice since 1980 to 2016. During that period of time, we've lost half of the Arctic sea ice. There is no question that the Earth is warming. Now, when the air warms, the thing about it is we can experience huge amounts of drought, but because warmer air also holds more moisture, that means when it does rain, it can rain like crazy. And now what challenge does that give us in terms of our erosion potential, losing more nutrients to our waterways? And speaking of waterways, in the U.S., I think we tend to be a bit kind of U.S.-centric with our focus and thinking. We think about, the hypoxic zone in the Gulf of Mexico and what's going on in the Chesapeake Bay and those types of places. But looking at a global scale, there's hypoxic zones and eutrophic zones in these coastal areas all around the world. We have some real major issues here with our environment, with the type of world that we want to leave those that do come behind us. Luckily, through a lot, well, it's not luck, I shouldn't say luck, but it's really a lot of concentrated efforts and strategies and investments. We do have a record of scientific research that shows us we can address a lot of these things by focusing on soil health. We know that we can build available water holding capacity. We can increase carbon sequestration. We can increase infiltration rates and reduce nutrient losses. And by this focus on soil health, and the beauty of it, of course, is that these are things that are beneficial to farmers and ranchers. And so that's really kind of the very heart of our premise for the comprehensive strategy that we've developed and that we offer to everyone to use, is that it's really going to be our farmers and ranchers around the world and forest owners. They're really the most critical ingredient. It's really going to be those that make that difference. And so that's led us to focusing on adoption, really is at the heart of our strategy. And it's also led us to really kind of challenge ourselves to say, okay, what is it that a producer needs in order to, when they're deciding whether or not to adopt these soil health promoting practices and systems? And that's taken us, of course, down the line that they really need information on the business case. We have to recognize that they're businessmen and businesswomen. They still have to make a living off of it. It's not just for society, but they also have to make a living. And that's a good thing because that helps them sustain our rural landscapes that we all love and enjoy and benefit from. And so that's therefore important that we address things like profitability of these systems, reductions in economic risk that we think can accrue through some of these systems, impacts of drought resilience, maybe land valuation, perhaps input requirements, building ecosystem service markets for them so farmers can basically be rewarded for those environmental benefits that they're accruing through those types of markets. It's also really important that we recognize that a farmer can't really be expected to manage something that they cannot measure. Soil health is a holistic concept, like human health is a holistic concept. Many different variables. It depends on your age. And as a human, you would have a different, health kind of scale or rating or understanding or expectation for someone that's 16 years old versus someone that's 60 years old. And some soils are more highly weathered than others too. And so you might have a different expectation for them too. And so all these complexities, they do make it difficult for establishing a measurement system, but we can do it. And you're going to hear today about our effort to evaluate over 30 different soil health measurements at over 120 research sites across North America, so that then we can identify what the most significant subset of that over 30, is for our farmers and ranchers to use, and our field conservationists and working with them. Of course, when we get all those things done, then it's really important to provide the training. And we feel like it's really critical that this type of training is not like just a one-way type of directional training, but instead we're working at developing farmer networks and really having training that's locally relevant. Just things like cover crops, what climate you're in, what soil you're in, what production system, rotation system you use. That impacts, of course, things like, your planting date, what species you use, what termination date, when you're going to fit it into that window for planting or terminating. So it really needs to be locally relevant information. And of course, a strong research and development program really backstops all of this stuff, not only because it contributes to the business case, but so many other things. And this is where, I've mentioned we've got plenty of research done to get us on this road, on this track. But man, oh man, the possibilities are endless. Think if we could really understand that chemical signaling between the microbes and the plant root, and basically plant the right types of cover crops and the right rotation crops in order to facilitate particular species and communities of microbes that are there that will naturally build that disease suppression, that can reduce those inputs, that will enhance nutrient availability, can build more aggregates so we get greater infiltration, reduce nutrient losses to our waterways. The last bullet there, soil health, human health connections, that's also something that is untapped, basically. We're very fortunate to have Dr. David Collier here you're going to be hearing from today that will speak to us a bit about that. But that's another one of those opportunities that is just largely untapped, in many respects, largely unknown. But after we do all this and get this adoption, it does not stop there. It's really important that we quantify the impacts of that adoption, because the quantifying those impacts and how they affect things like productivity, of course, that ties right into the business case, but also how those impacts impact things like carbon sequestration, water quality, water quantity, then that very naturally ties into helping us provide the evidence-based information for informing sound policies. It also can really help us provide the information we need to educate consumers. Because now, think of what we can do if we quantify these environmental benefits of the adoption of these soil health systems. Now we have consumers educated on those benefits. They're making the choice. They're voting with their dollar bill at the grocery store or the clothing that they're buying, that they want to support food and fiber and biofuel that's grown using these soil health systems because of these environmental benefits, because it's good for the farmer. Think of what we can do now. Watch this last arrow, please, to drive market demand. And now how all that ties back into the business case. And now we have a self-sustaining system that's less really dependent upon government support. We have a market-driven system that can get more and more adoption of these soil health systems, so we can get better water quality, so we can fight climate change, so we can feed the hungry, so we can provide pollinator habitat. So today you're going to hear a number of presentations that really tie into all these different components, all these different topics. But I ask you to kind of keep this in mind, this overall flow, this overall strategy in mind, because even though you might hear a presentation on economics or on policies, it's part of that picture. Soil health is that holistic concept. Yeah, it's complex, but that doesn't bother any of us, does it? No, we're up to it. And so it's not only, I guess, want you to kind of frame, these presentations and discussions and the network that you're having there, kind of within that overall kind of strategy, but I also ask you to please see yourself in it. Please see what you are doing. You can be doing the dadburnest, most minute, focused disciplinary research at the lab bench on the microbiome, but man, can it have impact on all of this. You can be working with farmers on thousands and thousands and thousands of acres and help achieve scale, but you can also be working with an urban gardener that is now very well connected. And that urban gardener at that scale, a half of a backyard type of scale, but also has other type of connections that could help drive market demand too. So all these things are really are all interconnected. So I wanted to just share our strategy, ask you all to see yourselves in it, and just to recognize that that's kind of really why the Soil Health Institute was put together, is to really kind of be that body that brings all these different forces together to affect this positive change for not only current generations, but for generations to come. So thank you very much for your attention.